Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining today's discussion, which is security becoming prompt driven? Just a couple of notes here. I'll talk about some session logistics before I jump in. You can drop your questions into the chat, and we will leave some time for Q&A at the end of the session. We're trying to keep this to under an hour, so probably within about 40 minutes or so, we'll try to get to the Q&A section. We'll also share a couple of quick poll questions during. We have two set up to get your feedback, and we'll close with some upcoming events and helpful resources. My name is Chris Ellis. Just by way of background, I've spent a good 30 years in the industry, network security, which evolved into cybersecurity. I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada, and I'd like to just chat a little bit about how AI is changing, how software now is being designed. As we probably well know, it's being designed, built, tested, documented, secured using AI, and organizations are starting to use AI agents in prompt-driven workflow, right? Asking questions, getting excellent results. Security teams are asking important questions like where specifically can AI help, and where do we still need that human expertise to come into play, and how do we establish frameworks, for example, like OWASP's SAM, to help organizations stay grounded as development continues to evolve. For those who don't know what SAM is, SAM was my best friend growing up, but in this case, it stands for the Software Assurance Maturity Model that we'll be talking about today. So indeed, today we'll be exploring how AI can accelerate security work, how teams can apply maturity models in this new environment, and why secure design, governance, and threat modeling remain essential. So we're excited today to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Aram and Seba so first of all, Aram is with Codific, and so Seba is with Toreon. If you'd like to introduce yourself, start with Aram, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Chris. I'll go first. So my name is Aram. I'm not going to try to pronounce my last name. Well, I can do that, but then other people might not be able to do that. It's Hovsepian. I've been in application security for the past, I don't know if it's 15 years or 20 years. I know 15 years ago, I had my best publication, the most cited publication. And I started as a researcher at the University of Leuven. I have a PhD in application security, and my research focused mainly on privacy threat modeling, more specifically the Linden framework, as well as predicting vulnerable components using machine learning. So technically, the things that are going around with Mythos finding or Cloud Code finding vulnerable, showing vulnerable code, this is something we started more than 15 years ago with. Back in the time, we didn't have LLMs, so it didn't really work out very well, but it was pretty interesting and pretty cool. Then I have sort of the second hat. I'm the CEO of Codific, which is a Belgian product firm, and our core goal is to simplify security. We have a product for that helps organizations manage security and make security manageable, which starts with the idea of security first and compliance. You get it as a bonus, as well as we have some consultancy services around that, where we also collaborate with, amongst others, Toreon, to help us out with that consultancy. And more lately, I have joined the OWASP SAM project as a core contributing member, which makes me especially happy because it's an amazing project. And this is where I hand it to my project lead, Seba, and good friend, Seba, whose last name is probably easier to pronounce than mine.
Yes, but let's just stick to first names here. So yes. Hi, and thank you, Chris, for setting this up. So I'm Sebastian, short Seba. I've started my career as a software developer, software engineer. I do not have a PhD, but interestingly, I did my master thesis on neural networks at the time when it was still the dark age of AI. So it was around 94, 95. Building a neural network of about 15,000 parameters. So it was a very, very tiny one, but to just do like basic hyphenation of words. So at the time that was fun, but it was very clear that we were still need a lot of more power and data for it to be useful. And now I would say 30 years later, we're here. So background in software engineering, have been doing software security, application security for the last 20, 25 years. Been involved also a lot in OWASP, both in organizing the chapter conferences, having been a board member as well, but also for the last, I think, 15 years, really took over the SAM project from Praveer together with Bart de Win. And also very happy that Adam also joined recently, another couple of people. Incidentally, we're both from Belgium, but it's not a Belgian-only team. So we have people from around the world contributing to OWASP SAM. So that's, I would say, my spare free time. Professionally, I've co-founded a company called Toreon. We're a cybersecurity consulting company here based in Belgium. Doing a lot of services for our customers, really business-driven cybersecurity, covering GRC, NIS2, CRA implementations, ISO 27000 certifications, but also a lot of product security. And worldwide, globally, we're also really known for our threat modeling training, which we call whiteboard hacking, but also something that we do a lot, help customers with setting up their threat modeling practices. So that's my background, and I'm really
Fantastic.
happy to participate in this call.
Yeah, well, thank you both for joining today. I didn't introduce where I'm from. I actually am a consultant working with Toreon, so this is should be fun today. And to set the stage, Aaron really raised a really interesting question when preparing for this webinar today. That Anthropic has released, you heard him mention Mythos, a coding agent, which unbelievably can purportedly write, review, scan, do threat modeling, do pen testing on its own code. So is application security as we know it over as a discipline? Now, no more security awareness training. No more threat modeling, no more vulnerability management. Hard to believe. So if you can imagine, if you're an AppSec engineer, you're probably thinking, are you planning for early retirement? But and we've seen this in the news. How far will AI go with this without any human help? But that is a question we're going to unpack today, not from a place of fear, but from a practical perspective. What can AI realistically do today? Where does it still need human oversight? And how should security teams adapt to this super quickly evolving model, right? So to start, can each of you please just briefly, introduce yourself? You introduce yourself, but I want to get your perspective on this. Is security becoming prompt driven? Is it really becoming that? Perhaps Seba, do you want to start with that one?
I think security is not a solved problem yet, despite what we've seen from Mythos. I think formally we can already write one very secure code. Like this is not something that we can't do from a human perspective. I think with AI generated code, it's both a curse and a blessing. I would say that we can now automate good practices, but unfortunately also a lot of bad practices also will be automated. And so while I really look forward to the kind of promise that a Mythos type like code generation would really generate a lot of more safer and secure code, we cannot just look over the piles and the heaps of legacy code that have so much vulnerabilities and issues with them that we'll have a lot of work in the near future to help customers and organizations in securing those, especially given that this kind of technology can also and will also be abused by people abusing it and to I would say abuse vulnerabilities in existing and legacy code. So
That's a great point. The legacy code, you're right. There's a ton of legacy code that still has to be taken care of and looked after as well. Before we even start looking forward. How about you, Aram? You raised an interesting point that if AI is going to meaningfully support software security, it needs to understand the full scope of application security, right? Not just isolated tasks like code review or scanning. How are you thinking about this in relation to frameworks like OWASP and SAM?
I want to throw in, first of all, you have this magic. People are also saying SDLC is done. We have this new thing. We don't even have a name for it. It's this magic cycle. It goes around. For me, that magic cycle is a good analogy would be quantum computing or nuclear fusion, where we have some examples of some mini success stories where you say, oh yeah, it actually works, but then it's under a lab setting. And based on my experience with AI, coding agents and code review agents, all of that, I think we are still going to go with a traditional SDLC as we know it for quite a while. And if we look into traditional SDLC, we have to think of security maturity models and program frameworks like SAM. But if you're not a fan of SAM, you might like OWASP TSOM, BSIM, or NIST SSDF. There is virtually nothing else going on around. These are the most prominent frameworks out there. And if you look into these frameworks, they are essentially a collection of best practices in security across the entire SDLC. And again, if we take SAM, there are 30 activities in SAM. And I haven't seen Mythos, but like I said, we played a lot with Claude Code, creating agents, skills. I'm pretty certain it can help with several SAM activities out of 30 topics. I'm going to call them topics for now. I don't want to call them streams. It can really help us out with 4 streams very well. It can help us out to some degree with a couple of other topics around there, but then that's still 15-20% of the total scope of the total job. So, and on top of that, it introduces new issues with the existing practices. So it also introduces new attack surfaces. It also makes some attack surfaces more easily exploitable. So in theory, your attack surface didn't grow, but then because of this, then malicious actors can also use the same AI, and they can exploit the same vulnerability a lot faster. It doesn't take them months, it takes them minutes. So I don't think the security as we know it is going away. AI is, in my opinion, to sum it up, is just going to be another tool, and it is pretty powerful tool. And if you, I'm not going to say we have figured it all out, but I hope there is a setting where it really works for you, and it does solve many of these problems which are currently taking months to figure out, and we can reduce that from months to maybe a couple of days, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's bring it down a notch a little bit and talk about AI agents specifically helping security teams. So which security activities are already, do you think, well suited for AI assistance? And a follow-up question would be, where can AI help reduce the amount of manual effort and speed up analysis? You talk about, you can see the shortening of the timeline for sure.
Yeah. So we have started looking into, and again, we are going in from a perspective of, okay, we know we have some experience with AI. We have used some of these agentic skills. Our experience is going to expand, and maybe in a couple of years from now, we're going to know much more. But based on what we know so far, and we have done the analysis of AI in the context of SAM, I think it is very helpful for testing, security testing, and triaging. So activities like, first of all, the SAST, DAST, and pen testing. This is something where AI can help a lot. It can actually combine the SAST tools with a pen tester and run it simultaneously, and it can find very, very interesting findings in a matter of minutes. Personal experience, we had 2 separate products which are sort of using the same shared architecture. The products were tested by external, very reputable pen testing firms before Claude became a big thing, actually, or before we started using it. And then after fixing these findings, we ran Claude Code on top of it with a specific context and a skill. And it found about 10 real things which were exploitable. And they were, let's say, not critical, but in terms of risk, some of them were medium risk. More specifically, there was, for instance, an abuse scenario where it would log in with the username password and it would skip MFA for some of the endpoints because there was some check that went on. There was a check that was missing to make sure that the MSA is also enforced. Just to give you an example, what it found, right, which manual pen testers didn't find. And by the way, again, manual pen testers, we're talking about really, really experienced and experts on a national level. That's one thing. So the tooling, it can help a lot with these scanners. It can also help fix some things by providing you potential fixes. But then with the fixes, you have to be really, really careful because it doesn't always work. But then a huge other class where it can really help is testing in a sense of unit testing, functional testing, and end-to-end test cases. So writing test cases for you, which is typically manually very intensive activity. And I'm talking about security test cases. So trying to log in with the wrong password, just to give you a very simple example. And then positive and negative test cases, going to more advanced scenarios like misuse test cases, where again, you write a full test case of an abuse of several chained business functionalities, fuzzing and stress testing. And all of this can run in as an automation in your CI/CD pipeline. After you're changing the code, it can run the same test cases again and again. And we're talking about So we're talking about fixed code test cases. It's not like an AI test which will run on top of your code and every time it's non-deterministic. We're talking actually about tests that are deterministic, making sure that you didn't break any existing security functionality.
Interesting.
Which again, manually, this would take really, really long time. And then in addition to that, it can be very helpful in activities like configuration hardening. It can check if you're using the configuration hardening based on your guidelines. And then it can also be very helpful in very boring things like governance and compliance, because up till now, we are used to having these separate teams who are taking care of that. And then actually, these are just a bunch of documents that are used for compliance purposes that never really drill down to the level of the teams. And just to remind the audience here, so governance is a pretty cool thing because then you can set up your standards, you can set up your policies at the level of the organization, and then you expect your teams to follow them. This doesn't really happen in practice, but now with AI, we can actually write them down as context, and then we can just give them to the teams and say, hey, use Claude and run this to make sure that your code actually complies with that policy and with those standards that we've defined at the corporate level. And of course, another big topic, and this is where I hand it over to Seba, is threat modeling. I strongly believe it can help with threat modeling. It cannot like replace the humans. I still don't see, but maybe Seba does. But again, I would like to give Seba the word here.
Yeah, that's sure.
To pick it thanks. Up. And indeed, what these models are really good at is automating the boring stuff, like the scaffolding, the templating, the documentation. Like I remember, I hated documenting. Like the code is a documentation, but nowadays actually with a lot of this can be automated and also can be indeed while the developers get a lot of automation and code cranked out because of the Gen AI support. Product security teams have that same possibility and should also leverage that. They can also use this automated codes and AppSec generation, but also policy enforcing and also putting in place like security controls and the so-called guardrails in place. So I think from the security point of view, can definitely do that. But to come back to the threat modeling part, I think the biggest advantage here is that when you are confronted with a complex system, a lot of code and a big code base, it's very hard to understand what actually goes on. And that's where GenAI also will help you. And like getting a grasp very quickly on how it works, how it operates. And it replaces a lot of the manual workshop driven, like tell me how this works, like start to draw stuff on whiteboards, which is still important from a certain point of, I would say, abstraction. But nowadays, with threat modeling, we have both the possibility to get a better understanding much faster, but also I imagine that in the near future and also already in some occasions, you will have the possibility to get that kind of information out of the tooling and while the developers are developing stuff directly, like in their environment, like having that interaction with a couple of agents that are actually threat modeling as they go, and then like alert or escalate this to, I would say, a human specialist or a threat modeling expert at the moment when they see that something is going on, that's potentially going to be fishy. That's probably still like future, but to some extent that can already be done. So I'm positive on that end, but threat modeling in itself is both a technical, it's a technique to perform, to understand threats to a certain system or application. But at the same time, it's also the awareness part, like speaking and having that interaction with different people involved when they're building complex systems. So having that common understanding and creating that shared vision towards a certain level of privacy or security, I would say exposure or relevant level. There's still at this stage, you need to involve humans. and so
for sure. Yeah.
So it's going to be a combination there.
Yeah, I love that too. And I tend to personally, I think of AI as a little having your own brilliant research assistant that is helping you. It's not taking over you. And another analogy I like to use is as a human, we like to talk about trying to find the needle in the proverbial haystack. It's so challenging, but stuff like AI and large language modeling it can find hundreds of needles and thousands of haystacks quickly. That's its beauty. It just processes tons of data quickly for you. Comes up, hey boss, here's what I found. Kind of like I say, the perfect research assistant. Yeah, we have a poll coming up. Thank you for posting that there, Laurie. How much is your company currently using AI to generate code? Hopefully everybody just saw the pop-up that popped up on the screen. So the poll here is, how much is your company currently using AI to generate code? So you can pick one of the options. One is not at all. One is experimenting in limited teams. Third option, some teams are using it regularly. Number 4, is it widely used across engineering? Or are you not sure?
Where
So
do we
tell
see
me,
the results
yeah,
of the poll?
that's a great question. I'm hoping we do see the results of the poll. I'll leave that. There we go.
Yeah, I see
there it
that.
is.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, Laurie, that's brilliant. Yeah, so let's see. Some teams, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Some teams are poking away at it, using it fairly regularly. It is widely used across engineering and experimenting in limited teams, equal partners, and yeah. Okay, good. That's really interesting.
Interesting.
Okay, great. I'm going to close that. Whoops. And so for the next question, I'm looking at, because obviously we have a set of preset questions. My next question is asking about OWASP SAM, and the one after that is about how SDLC is changing. And I think you kind of talked out broadly to a lot of that already, Aram, how OWASP gives organizations a structured way to think. Is there anything more you want to talk about it? Does SAM, for example, become even more useful as teams adopt AI, or can SAM help organizations understand what AI can support versus what still needs human expertise? Do you feel you've already talked to
Yeah.
that? And we should,
I
yeah,
think I am mostly focused on things where AI can help with. And then there are activities which are more important to have in mind and to use once you're using AI. And I want to start with, so our experience with using AI is that it tries to sort of please you and it generates very fast the feature that you need. And it's at a certain moment, you might even say, I don't really care about the quality of the code. I want to park that discussion a little bit. But based on our experience, we see that AI is going to push to have this thing which I call architectural drift. It's going to start watering down your architecture a lot faster than humans do. And the same happens for your things like your technology and your dependency management, which are very much interrelated. So you might have certain patterns in mind in mind, which are you using at the level of the architecture. You might have a certain technology stack which you want to keep using, and then you might have a certain set of dependencies. AI is typically going to just ignore all of that and try to give you the feature that you're looking for, which works perfectly and nicely. And even if you have your skills coded where you say, okay, this is my architecture, these are my patterns, stick with this, it's still not going to follow it to the letter. It's still going to try to break things. So you need to have, so architecture, technology, and dependencies are super important in this context. And also AI will, in the context of dependencies, it might start hallucinating in terms of packages and pulling a malicious package. That is a known threat that is going around. So in this context, SAM provides the best practices, again, things like reference architecture, security design patterns, best practices, how to manage technology and dependencies. For instance, at the highest level, SAM is saying you should have a known good list of your dependency and not allow any other dependencies to be added unless it's really vetted by a certain set of rules. This is something that could clearly help because you could also add this to your pipeline. And even if AI sort of overrides that, by AI, I mean, let's say Claude Code, if it overrides that, gives you the solution, it's going to break in the pipeline. So it gives you these, I'm going to call them guardrails. They're not guardrails as in Claude Code, but they are like your SDLC guardrails, which are becoming more and more important now because AI is very fast and it will get to an AI slop if you don't have these guardrails set around your SDLC and your teams use them.
Seba, want to jump in?
No, I think that's very much correct. And I think I probably like already more than half a year ago, we passed the point where developers were skeptical and started really using generative AI for production-ready systems. But from what I've seen and read around it, it's indeed like Aram said, it's really good at code generation and test driving new features. What at this stage it's not good at is indeed following the design patterns, like keeping like a straight architecture, or even like making short and like good decisions in terms of secure design. So it's just going to like create like a very nice UX, but the underlying layers, that's quite messy. So where at this stage we definitely need to still review that and improve that. Hopefully, I would assume that these agents will get better at that, and our prompting will get better at that, training will get better at that. Chris, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, you did touch on this concept of architecture, and I want to go back to something Aram said too, which I thought was interesting, and I wouldn't mind getting a bit more clarification how you said it's going to water down architecture. How do you see that happening, and how does it water down one's architecture just by bringing in bad elements?
It will bring in different technology stacks. It will just like will not follow your design patterns as you've seen it. So it will just like put on layers of extra complexity up until a point that it's not maintainable and becomes like what Aram says, slop code. So you need to really be very strict and provide it with clear coding guidelines, clear architecture reference architectures, and upfront, like I said, these are the things that you're actually allowed to bring in terms of dependencies. Again, making sure that it indeed follows those rules.
Yeah,
and unfortunately, it is also specific to the requirement. So if we had an example recently, we had to introduce a refresh flow of an OAuth OpenID Connect implementation, which was not implemented. And then instead of using the existing component to do that, the AI simply generated like a side component to realize the refresh flow, which worked. It worked correctly. But then at code review, somebody just went in and it just looked like for 1 second said, no, it's completely wrong. Restart. That doesn't work. And then, of course, if you gave the context saying like reuse this component, which realizes an OpenID Connect, an OAuth server, use the correct implementation of the server, use the refresh flow as it is in the server, then it did the right job. But then it seems like you can't just describe all the possible patterns across your code base, because then it becomes a huge skill. And we know that your skill also has to be not too big. That's at least what the best practices are claiming to be. We still don't really know what the real best practices are, because it's sort of very experimentative field. And also Claude Code recently had a couple of bugs which they said, okay, the model actually got dumber, because we were saying the model got dumber, they were like, no, nothing happened. It's the same, it's better. But then they say, yeah, the model got dumber because we were clearing the context cache on every call. So on every call, it was just forgetting the reasoning cache, not the context cache. Yeah.
That could be a problem. And I think one of the key things AI is not really good at is the concept of less is better sometimes, because sometimes it just gives you an overabundance of everything. Okay, well, next question then. Where do organizations need to be careful then when relying on AI agents for security activities? Things like how do we avoid false confidence, right? What should humans continue to validate, and where can AI make mistakes that look convincing? I know you've already touched on these, but maybe Seba, do you want to jump off on this one?
Well, there's a really lot of stuff to consider here. I think at the same time, we need to, when you're using AI, you need to treat AI and AI agents as junior developers. Be very clear at what to expect and check what their outcome is. So, and in that way, it's super. And I think you will leverage how coding agents will deliver work. That's one thing. On the other side, what we also need to really look out for and realize is that there's this extra attack surface that AI brings in, because a lot of the stacks and the software that is being developed also includes generative AI itself. Also, the pipelines will have more and more AI interfaces and generative AI interfaces. So we need to be aware of issues like prompt injection that have not been solved. And so we need to be careful at how we build this and how we depend on it. So depending on the risk level of the software that you're working on, you need to be like with regular software, actually, need to add more controls and put more checks and balances in place than for maybe like software that's less critical. I would not write generative AI code to check or control the next nuclear reactor for the next couple of years.
Good thought. Aram, do you want to jump in? Then we'll do another poll.
Yes, so I definitely what Seba said, you have to treat it, although it may seem like an expert, the confidence is like it's also a psychological thing. I hope there will be some studies that show the psychological side of this, but it's so confident for some of the things you see, oh my God, yes, this is really, really right. You start switching your mindset, like, okay, this is not a junior developer, this is an actual pro. But then for some other tasks, it can be even worse than a junior developer. And things that we really have to, this psychological aspect, I don't have expertise, so I don't know what is the right way to go with that. But then things that we definitely need to be careful is least privilege. Absolutely, don't give any access to anything. Your secrets are like, there is this, organizations are looking for secrets in the source code. That's done. We're done. The secrets on your machine, which are not in the source code, they are going to leak with AI. And of course, Claude says we're not going to use your data for training. If you get the right license by default, you can also turn it off. But you don't know. I mean, it could still leak. And I think there was no, that was not the case. But still, so you have to consider suddenly your secret management is like super important. And what do? You just don't give out secrets to anyone. Least privilege for anything. You don't give runtime privileges to the AI agents to change something in runtime. That would be the more careful way to go with that. And like I said, architecture, technology, dependency management. And then another aspect is keeping the human in the loop. I don't think so. There are these ideas like, okay, we can automate the reviews. Yes. So Chris, by the way, if you can show the SDLC with AI slide, yep. I'm not going to go too much in terms of time here, but essentially here, this is like how to develop. We use this internally in our organization. How do you develop code with AI? You can let it write the code, and then you can have an agent which reviews that code, and that has a different skill set. Review just like, did it write good code? You can have an agent which checks for alternative solutions, and manually you can still check what is going on. You can have a security review, but then you still need a human review for yourself, and then send it to a merge request, which has like a fully human review of the code. So, and you have also to write test cases. So you can use this junior to review its own code, but then it's still never going to be good. You still have you still need the human in the loop on the key decision points. And this is what we really need to be careful. I don't think we can ditch the human now, no matter what people say. My experience doesn't align with that. If we ditch the human, we're going to go from something working to a slop in no time.
Yeah, it's like having your 8-year-old check the homework of your 6-year-old. It's like, so be careful.
That's a pretty good analogy. Laurie, do we have a poll that we wanted to bring up after this question? Here we go. Thank you. Biggest concern, it says, what is your biggest concern with AI-generated code? Multiple choice. Let's give it at least a minute here. Security vulnerabilities. That's a big one. Lack of human review. Is it data privacy exposure? Privacy if you're in North America. Unclear ownership, that's a great one. Or accountability. I think that's a big thing, because you were talking, Aram, about how you shouldn't let it have access to private.
Yep.
Yeah, but who's to say I didn't know that was one of our roles. I mean, accountability is going to be tough. Overconfidence in AI outputs, I think that's a big one. All right, let's see the results. Survey says, well, there's a tie for first place, it looks like, right? So security vulnerabilities, I would agree, yeah, and overconfidence in AI outputs. Brilliant. I think they're all really valid. Cool. Yeah, thanks very much.
I think if there's one thing, and it's security vulnerabilities. I think this is a two-edged sword here. I think security vulnerabilities in generated code, I don't think we're going to have any more like vulnerabilities than we already had with human generated code, and like maybe going to be even better there. And so But what we're definitely expecting is over the next couple of months, years, way more vulnerabilities that are going to be discovered in our existing software and our existing infrastructure and our existing dependencies. And some companies are already organizing themselves, but I would say the majority of the organizations are not ready for the vulnerabilities that are going to be exposed and out there. So if there's one thing that you should be doing is really making sure that you have capacity and reactions, like fast reaction speed to critical vulnerabilities that are going to be exposed in your software in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and we're getting kind of towards the end of this, and I just want to ask a really pointed one, Seba. It's about from a threat modeling perspective, and I know you've touched on that. What changes when AI agents become part of the system, and do we need to threat model the application, the agent? All right, kind of a speed challenge. Can you give us an answer on that you think is valid?
So I think in general, threat modeling is now even becoming more important than before. I think a lot of the security coding bugs and security issues that we've already that we're challenged that those were always a challenge, but we are now in a position that we have added a layer of abstraction on creating software. Right? So it's not about the code anymore. It's about expressing what we want and checking the outcomes. And I think making sure that the underlying infrastructure and architecture is good and that we have a good insight of what can go wrong, the threat model, so that we can give the right instructions to create more secure systems. Security by design is going to be way more important over the next couple of years, especially like with coding has become so cheap nowadays that you can create way more software. And digitalization is going to speed up even more over the next couple of years. Our dependency on software and digital trustworthy systems are going to be higher. So
Right.
threat modeling is the key to make that safer and more secure.
Yeah, and it always has been too, so it's never going to go away, I think. All right, so as we kind of approach the end of the webinar, I just want to ask you a great question, I think, is if attendees can take away one message from today's discussion, what should it be? Maybe Aaron, start with that.
I would say that AI is just a tool. It's a very powerful tool, but it's a tool, and it's not going to really replace people and processes today. And I would say, despite the promises of and the actual capability of going really fast in terms of this coding, where you can start coding in a matter of weekend, you can write a very complex system. Don't chase the speed, because it's gonna end up in a slop. So that was like our experiments with AI were like, oh my God, this is very fast, very amazing. But then once we start to add these quality checks, it slows down substantially, where these self-reviews and these self-checkpoints pull away the speed, and then they find issues that you have to fix. But it's going to accelerate. Obviously, there is quite some acceleration in there.
Yeah. Seba?
No, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, I was just saying, final thoughts.
I would say the one thing that I wanted, and I already shared it again before, is have a really good look at your capacity for, I would say, disclosure of vulnerabilities and fixing and having your capacity to fix vulnerabilities fast when you're creating like a lot of software or systems. And I know a lot of organizations have an install base of really critical systems. And for them to be ready for the vulnerabilities that are going to be exposed is going to be critical in the next couple of months and years.
Well said. Q&A. So let's see if folks have any questions that they'd like to pose. Folks, I think the mic can be open. Do you want to have any questions we can pose to Aram or Seba? Thoughts? And what I'm going to do is just go ahead and talk to some of what's coming up as you think about if there's any questions. So we will be here for the next few minutes. But yeah, so let's talk about some upcoming things. Catch us at OWASP Global AppSec. That's in Vienna, June 22 through 26. There's this one-day OWASP SAM training that we've been talking about. That's, boy, in Vienna. I'm just thinking, well, how I would love to go to Vienna Sam and DSOM user day, June the 24th, 3-day training. Maybe take a screenshot. You will get a recording of the video. So these are really cool events. And on the heels of this as well is the Threat Mod Con, which is starting the evening of June the 26th and going into the 27th. So the Threat Mod Conference. Anything you want to talk about to this, either of you guys? I think you've been to a lot of these, Seba. Good takeaways when you go to these.
I've been to all of them before,
Yeah,
so
I think
no, so we have both the conference itself, the OWASP conference, which is on Thursday and Friday. But before that, indeed, there's on Wednesday the OWASP SAM and DSOM user day, and then obviously we also have the 3-day training, and then afterwards on Saturday it's a full week. You have threat modeling, the conference. So it promises really a really good and interesting program there. Yeah. If you're in or around Vienna, make sure to pass by.
What's next for Codific? You have some upcoming AI Mythbusters episodes. Those are fun. Aaron will test how far AI can really go with documentation and compliance work and where human expertise is still needed. That's very cool. CRA, boy, if you're in Canada, that's the Canada Revenue Agency. Nobody wants to deal with them. But a deep dive into cyber resilience act from both the legal and technical perspective. So that's something that Aaron and the Codific team is sponsoring. And up for Toreon, you have the webinar of developer-friendly threat modeling. It's all about threat modeling for sure, making security design activity, not a tax. Speaking of taxes, nice little segue there. That's Thursday, May the 7th. So that's really on the heels
2 days.
Coming up in I was just trying to think, what day are we here today? So Tuesday, 2 days. Thank you. And Sebastian's going to be speaking on that along with Iris Risk threat modeler Georgios. Can we pop that into the chat perhaps, Laurie, some of these links as well?
Toreon there.
Yeah, she already did.
Yeah, fantastic. And then there's the insider newsletter. There is the modeling playbook, which is free. Excellent step-by-step guide to level up your threat modeling practice. For me, threat modeling and security awareness are just so cornerstone. For the average person's security awareness, if they aren't aware of what not to click on, they're going to click on it. Threat modeling, when you're trying to build software from the ground up, always thinking of looking left and right before you cross the street. That's your basic real world threat modeling, right? I think that's good. Support context. Yeah, Laurie, I'll put Laurie's been on the call today, very quietly working in the background. There's her email if you want to reach out. She's the Director of Business Dev. And Michaela Masters from the team on Codific. So going back, go back to the Q&A again?
I saw there was a question from Jim. Hi, Jim.
Cool.
So any initial key guidance for building a software factory, such as setting expectations with leaders? Adam, I don't know if you want to...
Jim, can you provide a little bit more context for the question, please?
Yeah. Sorry, it's pretty broad, but with agentic development, being ideated in some organizations, my organization is in that phase, just helping them to understand the quality outputs and not the dream that agents will solve all problems. I guess just some initial guidance we would maybe want to impart on leaders as we endeavor along this software factory prototype journey.
Yeah, I would start personally, and that like one of our biggest concerns or problems or sinkholes in terms of timing and manpower was writing test cases for or going to 100% code coverage or whatever your metric is for regular. I'm talking about regular development, not even security related, but security related development is also largely part of that. And it seems that AI, the agents generating test cases, they are very good at that and they are very fast. They're still doing like silly things, like you tell them use data providers and this is the architecture for test cases. Sometimes they don't follow that. But if your test cases are not of the best quality, it's not going to be a drama. It's not going to come back a couple of months later and hit you in the head. It's not going to pull down the productivity. Worst case, you can just do another prompt and rewrite the test. And that's a huge quick win. And that is a nice quick win because, again, it's going to make your software more qualitative and it's going to save you time. Of course, if you haven't written tests before, There are teams that don't have that mentality or policy, like you have to write test cases for all the code. It's gonna, of course, use more time now because you didn't do that before, but it's a huge added value. And then that there is largely nothing that can go wrong there. And my idea is that you could start from these low-hanging fruits where not much can go wrong. You are not going to destroy the architecture by just generating a bunch of code, which seems nice and it's working initially. But then somehow when you add features later on, somehow you go back and you're like, oh my God, this code is impossible to read. So we can't review this. We have to rewrite it from scratch again. And that happens very fast, by the way. It's a personal experience. It can happen in literally in a couple of weeks' time where the code base suddenly is like, oh my God, what the hell is this? That's my suggestion. Start with quick wins, and there are areas where it's going to do a very good job.
And I want to ask too, when you say you leaders, are you talking about leadership team? Because Jim specifically,
Yes.
yeah, and I had the challenge I had too when I was selling security. Leadership always thinks things in dollars and cents. It's like, why should I spend this money? So always presenting things in terms of how it can save them money or make them money, leadership will start to listen, I always find. So maybe finding a way to show how this is important to not lose money and to, I don't know if you can show how it's going to make money, but certainly it can show how it can streamline timelines, but it certainly is something that can prevent you from losing lots of money too. Anyway, it's just my thought, my experience with the leadership teams.
Yeah, and I should probably add to that, you will not make money by firing your software engineers and thinking that AI agents will write all your software. On the contrary, I think you will save money if you train all your software engineers to become better at leveraging AI. So their output will be much higher and more efficient. Yeah.
Really great point, because I'm sure some leadership is thinking in terms of who can I eliminate with all this new AI stuff, so really good point there, Seba. Cool. Well, if there's no other thoughts, I guess we can wrap the session up. I really appreciate, or is there any more questions? I'll just check the chat. It looks like we're good. I see all the resources there. Right. All right. Well, thank you, Aram. Thank you, Seba. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll be doing this again in the future. Yeah. All right. Cheers. And everybody who joined us today. Yes.
Thank you,
Chris.
Thanks.
And
thanks everyone.
Yeah, you all take care, and hopefully we'll see you on a future event.
Thank you.